Who is Jeffrey Epstein? Philanthropist? Sex trafficker? Convicted pedo with a luxury suite in a Trump's name reserved for sex with minors? And by the end of this video, I will show documentation that proves it. Yes, Jeffrey Epstein, billionaire playboy and all-around terrible person, has spent most of his life rubbing elbows with some of the world's most famous people, establishing a network of friends that he can either exploit or engage with in unspeakable debauchery. Because like him, his friends have an insatiable appetite for young women, so much so that he's been busted for having sex with kids. 14-year-old girls to be exact, or boys, maybe both, who knows. These days he spends his time on his own private island out in the Virgin Islands. This is where he parties like a rock star on the weekends with his millionaire friends, people in Hollywood and top officials. He's even flown them out on his private jet where they've been rumored to have sex with minors on the plane to avoid law enforcement and prosecution. He calls it the Lolita Express, and according to the tower logs, there are hundreds of hours logged in by some of the most famous people in the world. Maybe you'll recognize some of their names. This all changed, and rightfully so, when a woman named Virginia Roberts came forward and claimed that she was raped at the age of 14 by a government top official. This led to an FBI investigation which led back to Epstein. One of the people that Roberts claims raped her was none other than Prince Andrew, which he adamantly denies. Here's all you need to know about the Epstein case. He was charged with multiple unlawful sex acts with a minor, and by some quote-unquote miracle, he was given the deal of the century according to some lawyers. All he had to do was plead guilty to one count of solicitation to a 14-year-old for prostitution. In exchange for this plea deal, all his co-conspirators would not be charged with any crimes. Then he was sentenced to 18 months work release, which basically means he got to stay in his own stockyard, hire his own personal security, and for 6 days a week he got to leave for 12 hours at a time for quote-unquote work. This followed a 1-year probationary period. And he had to register as a level 3 offender, which basically means you can guarantee he'll reoffend. Now here are the rumors of the case. Epstein allegedly paid off top officials, judges, lawyers, whomever would give him a lighter sentence. And even though the FBI produced a 53-page federal indictment on Epstein, they were worried that some of their agents were actually involved in the actual sex trafficking. So some would say that FBI was reluctant to continue with the case because they didn't want the agency to look bad. And then there's the rumor that Epstein threatened to blackmail his powerful friends because unbeknownst to them, he secretly videotaped them having sex with minors. And lastly, there's a rumor that Epstein had to settle out of court with over 40 girls. This brings us to the now defunct Gawker.com, which back in 2015 published Epstein's Little Black Book of Famous Numbers. You might ask, how did Gawker.com come across the Little Black Book? Well, Epstein had a butler named Alfredo Rodriguez who tried to sell it and then lied to the FBI about trying to sell it. And then he tried to sell it again, and then the FBI busted him and put him in prison for obstruction of justice, where he later died. Now this is a redacted version of Epstein's book. As you can see, the information is from 2004-2005, so this was before the iPhone. The amount of numbers would make you assume that these people are more than just acquaintances to Epstein. As I go through this book, ask yourself 2 questions. Number 1, how many people have your number that you never gave out to? And number 2, why would you give your number to an alleged pedophile, child molester, rapist, etc. Okay, so I'm not going to bore you with all the details of every page. I'm just going to fast forward it to all the famous names. This is the address that I'm interested in. Here you can see it says 301 East 66th Street, New York, and apartment for models. Well, after doing some research, you know who owns the building? Mark Epstein, Jeff's brother, who probably rents it out to Jeff's pals. But after doing a little more digging, you know who technically owns it? That's right, the Archdiocese of New York City. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Now, as you can see, scroll down and it's on the second page, a column of names that's connected to that apartment. Now, there are 2 important names that we're trying to look for here. Jean-Luc Brunel and 14G, which would be the guest. I took it upon myself to uncover who all these people are. I'm not going to disclose that in this video. Oh. I know, but I got to stay on point. I will tell you that there was a CEO, a couple of Instagram models, a D-list rated actress, and that's about it. So who is this Jean-Luc Brunel? He's a top modeling agent credited with discovering Christy Turlington, and in a new lawsuit with Epstein, he's accused of recruiting aspiring young models for sex with his powerful pals. 2 other people of interest include Nada Markinkova and Sarah Kellen. Nada was considered the sex slave of the entourage, while Sarah was the ringleader and supplier of young girls to Epstein and his pals. As of 2015, both women have claimed to move on from the entourage, change their names, start new careers, but some documents have shown that they're still receiving mail at the 301 66th Street address. They claim it's mail from their entrepreneurial ventures, and nothing more. So who is in 14G? Let's find out. So if you go to melissadata.com, it should take you to this page here. If you have a hard time finding it, the link is in the description. So there are quite a few options you can use like address check, but for this we're just going to use personator. Here's where you would fill in the form. I'm going to automatically fill it in to save time. And as you can see, it's 14G. I'm going to go ahead and leave the name blank, and then whatever name that's supposed to be there will automatically pop up. So here we go and hit submit. And as you can see, it says Sarah Kellen. Now there's some confusion between what Nada's name is, if it's Nadia or Nada. I guess it's Nadia, so I'm going to go ahead and use that name. But to avoid any confusion, I'm going to use address check instead of personator. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in the space, and her apartment is 10F, which is what I found. So click submit, and just to verify, you can see that her name indeed is at that address. Now we move on to the beloved Jeffrey Epstein. As you can see, his address is 8A, so I hit submit. And sure enough, you got a name and address match for Jeffrey Edward Epstein, which is his name, and that is his correct birth date. Now let's move on to John Luke Brunel. As you can see, his address is 7J. So go ahead and hit submit. And as you can see, his name and address also do match. I'm sure you're wondering how I got all this information. I went through each of the floors, which took some time, but what I did find interesting was that one apartment number had 2 letters, 6EF. Now before I enter that one in, I'm going to show you that if you put in any random name, like say for example Joe Blow, and you were to hit submit, if the name does not match the address, it will come up as not verified. This will show you that I have to put in the correct information for it to work. Alright, it's that moment of truth. Let's put in that name. Then let's not forget the specialized apartment number, 6EF. Hit submit. And here you go. And as you can see, the name and address match. Now I know what you guys are going to say. How can you leave this video without showing the name? I understand. But there's 2 reasons. Number 1, if there's any heat with exposing this name, well, I'm not having any of that. And number 2, I want to get you, the viewer, engaged. I can assure you this name is 100% legitimate. And for those of you who just assume that it's just a coincidence that this person has a floor in between Jeffrey Epstein and John Luke Brunel, I can assure you they weren't getting together to read Bible scriptures. If somebody finds out who this name is, post it in the comments below. Until the next episode, I bid you farewell.